Story 1. A major fissure eruption occurred in southeast Iceland. Since the Norse settlement, there have been two significant eruptions: the Elja eruption around 939 CE and the Lakajagar eruption of 1783 to 1784. Although Elja was larger, the massive Laki eruption is better documented. It created local devastation, crop failures, and poisoned grazing animals and people. Half of the farm animals and 20% of Icelanders died. The situation became so severe that the Danish government considered evacuating the entire island. We now know the Laki plume of sulfur dioxide spread across the northern hemisphere. In the United Kingdom, it killed tens of thousands of people. Elsewhere, there were crop failures and poisonous fogs. The climate was severely disrupted with a series of bitterly cold winters that caused the Mississippi River to freeze in New Orleans and ice flows in the Gulf of Mexico. Rainfall in the Nile Valley and monsoon seasons in India and China failed, leading to famine. The total death toll in the 18th century was up to 1 million people. If you want to know more, here are some useful resources. 1. The Wikipedia page on Laki provides much more detail than presented here. 2. For a contemporary report of the eruptions, John Steingrimson's Fires of the Earth is recommended. He was the parish priest in the area during the disaster. An English translation has been published by the University of Iceland, although it is somewhat difficult to find. 3. You can visit Laki, although it is not especially impressive at ground level. The craters formed by the eruption are a 25-kilometer chain near Kirkjubæjarklaustur in southeast Iceland. They are off the main road on routes F206, Lakavegur, and F207, Lakajagarvegur, which are dirt tracks suitable only for four-wheel drive vehicles during the summer. It is not feasible as a day trip from Reykjavik, but there are many things to see and do in the area. 4. For a scientific paper about the effects of Laki, see Stephen Self and Thorvaldur Rarsson's Atmospheric and Environmental Effects of the 1783 to 1784 Laki Eruption. A Review and Reassessment. 5. Another relevant scientific paper is Illness and Elevated Human Mortality in Europe coincident with the Laki fissure eruption by J. Grattan, M. Durand and S. Taylor, which includes data from English burial records and provides some of the first evidence that the eruption poisoned people outside of Iceland. Story 2. A powerful earthquake occurred along the New Madrid Fault in Missouri. Story 3. The ocean fisheries will collapse. Yesterday's trash species are today's featured catch of the day and will be tomorrow's memory. Harvesting is occurring at unsustainable rates while environmental degradation steadily reduces habitat and forage ranges. For many people in developed nations, fish is one option among many for protein. For most people in developing nations, it is the cheapest and most accessible option. When it is gone, there will be catastrophic socio-political and economic upheavals. Story 4. Most large-scale farming practices are non-renewable. We need to continuously find new ways to farm or we will not be able to grow food anywhere near the scale we do now. Story 5. The Cascadia subduction zone off the coast of the Pacific Northwest will rupture again. Depending on the specifics, it will be a very bad day or an utterly catastrophic day for the Pacific Northwest. This will be due to the earthquake itself and the subsequent tsunami. It ruptures every several hundred years, and the last one occurred in the year 1700. Story 6. The Atlantic meridional overturning circulation is slowing or halting. Melting of northern latitude glaciers is effectively flooding the North Atlantic Ocean with cold fresh water, disrupting the global conveyor belt in the ocean that redistributes heat across the planet. If the circulation slows enough, which is expected to happen within decades rather than centuries, global weather patterns will shift entirely. Western Europe will experience severe cold. The southern hemisphere will retain much more heat. Sea level rise will increase significantly, and the oceans will lose some of their capacity to sequester carbon dioxide. This, in turn, increases atmospheric warming, accelerates glacier melting, and creates a positive feedback loop. We do not want this circulation to stop. Story 7. The amount of methane and other gases bubbling up from the Arctic is much higher than previously thought. Greenhouse gases are significantly increasing. Story 8. Antibiotic resistance and the emergence of superbugs, including pandemic-resistant bacteria, are serious concerns. Reports indicate that by the year 2050, deaths caused by infections from these bacteria will be among the leading causes of mortality. Unfortunately, bacteria are evolving faster than new antibiotics can be developed. The indiscriminate use of antibiotics in the dairy and poultry industries is worsening the situation. While not as catastrophic as a natural disaster, this threat is still alarming. The core issue is the speed and willingness to develop new antibiotics. Other drugs, such as chemotherapy, are more profitable, which affects investment in antibiotics. It is hoped that advancements in phage therapies or new antibiotics will become available before it is too late. Story 9. People do not really know, but coffee beans are on their way to extinction. Many coffee species are at risk due to environmental changes and other factors. Scientists reveal that 60% of wild coffee species are threatened with extinction. This poses a significant risk to biodiversity and the future of coffee production worldwide. Story 10. Human medication and illegal substances are entering water systems through sewage and posing a serious threat to wildlife. Story 11. In 2038, the old Unix and Linux systems that have physical 32-bit time registers are going to run out of time. It is similar to the year 2000 bug, but this is a physical memory issue. Hopefully, all the old systems will be replaced by then. Story 12. Most people do not realize how fragile the United States and other countries' food systems are. There are very few smaller family farms. Everything is corporately owned. If anything disrupts the distribution channels, such as a trucker strike or warehouse strike, most supermarkets will be out of fresh food in 3 to 4 days. When that starts, the panic buying of canned food will clear the rest. Not a doomsday person, but you can fit a lot of staple foods under your bed if you do not have pantry space. Story 13. The true disease scare is fungal infections, as they are becoming harder to detect and easier to misdiagnose. Some fungal infections spreading right now can live on surfaces for months, are easily misidentified, and are not susceptible to most antifungal treatments. One example is Candida auris. Story 14. I have worked with water for the majority of my professional career. If the average American knew how uneducated and unskilled the typical water operator is, the disaster would be clear. Water and wastewater districts across the country are not being transparent about the contents of the products coming from their treatment plants. Story 15. It has been written about, but no one I speak to, even in my hospital, realizes it. A very worrying doctor shortage. Not only are there simply more baby boomers, but they are also aging and will now need more intensive medical care. Story 16. Water scarcity is not caused by climate change, but by economic and infrastructure problems. Earthquakes. Wildfires. Story 17. Microplastics are being found everywhere in our environment and have already been discovered in the blood and tissues of wildlife and humans. Scientists do not yet know what the long-term health effects will be. I believe they will not be positive. Story 18. The big one, in northern Utah. We live on or near a fault line that rarely produces earthquakes. A 5.4 magnitude earthquake with many aftershocks occurred, raising some awareness. However, countless buildings and structures in Salt Lake County alone would collapse in a major earthquake. Story 19. Bacteria will become resistant to our antibiotics. Factors contributing to this include countries where antibiotics are available over the counter, use of antibiotics in animals, substandard drugs manufactured in developing countries with inadequate levels of the active ingredient, and prescriptions of antibiotics for colds or flu. Story 20. Deep fakes. You may think you can tell the difference now, but as it gets more sophisticated, you will not be better at identifying it than your grandparents. What will the world be like when we cannot trust anything we see or hear? What will happen when anyone can make a video of you saying anything they want or deny terrible actions by simply claiming it is a fake? I sincerely believe the consequences could be the end of humanity as we know it. Story 21. I am not sure if this counts as a disaster. People have known for a while that in the coming decades, Florida's municipal freshwater infrastructure will fail due to saltwater intrusion. It has already started in certain places, and large metropolitan areas like Miami are trying to curb it. The bedrock under Florida is porous. Salt water enters it from below, while fresh water fills it from above. Sea levels are rising, causing salt water to push upward with greater force. The fresh water on the surface cannot reach the bedrock because of active drainage and barriers such as asphalt and buildings. As a result, the fresh water pressure pushing down is weaker. This causes the boundary where fresh water turns into salt water to move higher in the bedrock, affecting current plumbing water inputs. Story 22. As far as global pandemics go, coronavirus disease was not nearly as devastating as it could have been. Keep all aspects of coronavirus disease the same, but increase its lethality. For context, the bubonic plague killed approximately 80% of those who became infected. If something with the same transmissibility and lethality as the bubonic plague manifested today, especially now that we have seen how people respond to pandemic controls, we would be finished. Story 23. There is going to be a serious disaster when you get very high humidity and temperature. It is called a wet bulb event. Death rates in that city will be very high, and if it occurs in Mecca during the Hajj, the death rate will be astronomical. Story 24. We are running out of the mineral that curling stones are made from. Eventually, we will not be able to enjoy curling in its current form. The Winter Olympics will never be the same. Story 25. The weakening of the new Madrid fault line could be massive. Back in the early 1800s, it caused earthquakes so strong that the Mississippi River flowed backward for a short time. Nowadays, with denser cities and minimal preparedness in that region, a major earthquake could devastate states far beyond Missouri. The worst part is that it is overdue. Story 26. Methane clathrate release. When organic matter is buried and decomposes slowly over time in cool conditions, methane deposits in the form of clathrates form. Clathrates are solid below 5 degrees Celsius but revert to gas and expand greatly when warmed. There are vast amounts of methane trapped in shallow seas and permafrost tundra worldwide. Precise quantities are still uncertain. As global climate change progresses, these deposits are warming. Crater-like formations are appearing in the Canadian and Russian Arctic regions where clathrate deposits sublimate to gas, blowing off the overlying sediment. Methane is a very potent short-term greenhouse gas. Large methane releases will likely cause sharp spikes in global warming. Story 27. If the Great Salt Lake dries up, and it is dangerously close to doing so, it will be an environmental catastrophe for the western region. Everyone in that valley will be choking on dust clouds full of heavy metals. Story 28. Historically, bird flu has a 52% death rate in humans. A large avian flu outbreak in cows started in Texas earlier this year and is currently spreading across California. UC Davis reports that 1 in 5 milk samples from grocery stores test positive for bird flu, but it is safe because of pasteurization. Raw milk, which is not pasteurized, is not safe. Regarding the response to the outbreak, since the H5N1 bird flu virus was first reported in California in early August, 124 dairy herds and 13 people, all dairy workers, have been infected. The majority of dairy workers in California have no protections. Most are immigrants and at least half are undocumented. These individuals often do not have a trusted relationship with state and federal government officials. A woman working behind the cash register at Tipton's Dollar General, one of the few stores in this small agricultural community near Highway 99, said many people have the virus. The biggest concern is that people infected with bird flu could catch another flu virus and develop a new avian flu variant that is highly transmissible in humans, potentially maintaining the 52% death rate. For context, coronavirus disease 2019 had a death rate of about 2.1 to 2.3%. Story 29. I do not have an answer, but just wanted to say this has been an excellent thread to read. You all know so many things. I am sitting here wondering if these are your little hobbies. Learning about these small ticking time bombs. Thank you. Story 30. A Category 4 or 5 hurricane obliterates Houston and Galveston, leading to a massive pollution event in Galveston Bay and destroying it for 100 to 200 years. 40% of all oil refining capacity in the United States is instantly knocked out. Story 31. The Atlantic meridional overturning circulation is slowing and may eventually stop. Most people do not know about it, but it is the underwater current that brings salty warm water from the south up north, keeping temperate weather in the northeast and Europe. If this current slows and stops, it will cause a mini ice age in the northern hemisphere and disrupt the global climate, in addition to raising water levels in the Atlantic Ocean. Scientists have been warning about this for a while, and the slowdown is now considered a matter of when, not if. Story 32. Our carbon sink has been diminishing year after year, and it is reaching a point where we are not filtering much of the carbon anymore. We desperately need to seek new solutions, such as using large algae ponds. The solution is not just planting trees everywhere. Trees are relatively inefficient at filtering air. The focus should be on seeding local ponds and lakes with local algae blooms and other more efficient and easier to maintain methods of producing large amounts of air filtering plants. Story 33. We will have quantum computers. When that happens, there will be massive implications because they can break modern encryption. Even if we move to encryption that quantum computers cannot break, all the data that existed before will be decryptable. Therefore, all the current data that governments and malicious actors have stored, waiting to mass decrypt, will be available to them. Story 34. I do not know if I would say it is likely, but the Three Gorges Dam failing certainly sounds terrible. Story 35. This is a man-made disaster specific to the United States, involving a nursing shortage. With baby boomers retiring and becoming increasingly ill, the current number of nurses does not look promising. Most of the statistics have slipped my mind since I wrote a paper on this topic in nursing school, but I cannot imagine the situation has improved. Story 36. By the early 2000s, the American global positioning system that most of the Western world relies on had become so precise and had so much technology based on it that the Bush administration approved the dismantling of its ground-based equivalent, which was then performed under Obama. Besides our smartphones and airplanes, things like farm equipment and even loading and unloading equipment at ports now rely on it exclusively. Russia's version of global positioning system is basically as advanced, but they have maintained their ground-based system as a backup while simultaneously working on missiles that could cripple ours. Without a ground-based backup, we would be vulnerable if they started taking out our global positioning system satellites. Story 37. Earthquakes are rare in Boston, but if one similar to the Cape and earthquake in 1755 occurred today on the much more populated North Shore of Boston, the damage could be catastrophic. That earthquake was possibly related to the severe earthquake a few weeks earlier in Portugal, across the Atlantic. If another large earthquake hits there, New England could be next. Story 38. The next pandemic. COVID-19 was a poorly managed dress rehearsal for the next major pandemic. It is not a question of if, but when. Story 39. The global water scarcity crisis. While climate change, natural disasters, and other environmental issues are often in the spotlight, the looming shortage of freshwater resources poses a massive threat to billions of people in the near future. Why water scarcity is a major threat? Rapid population growth. As the global population increases, the demand for water grows. Agriculture, industry, and household needs all rely heavily on freshwater, and it is being used faster than it is replenished in many regions. Overuse of groundwater. Many areas, especially in heavily agricultural or industrialized regions, are over-extracting groundwater from aquifers that take decades or centuries to recharge. This overuse can lead to water shortages, land subsidence, and even the collapse of local ecosystems. Climate change. Changes in rainfall patterns and increased droughts, exacerbated by global warming, are making freshwater less predictable and less available. Some regions that rely on glaciers or snowmelt for water, like parts of South Asia, could face severe shortages as these ice reserves shrink. Water pollution, industrial waste, agricultural runoff, and untreated sewage are contaminating many freshwater sources, making them unusable or unsafe without costly treatment. The growing pollution of rivers, lakes, and groundwater further reduces the available supply of drinkable water. Story 40. A prion disease outbreak would leave us with limited options besides attempting to quarantine everyone affected. If people do not show symptoms quickly, quarantine may not be effective. There is no treatment for those affected. Destruction through cremation is about the only option. Story 41. I am completely convinced the next world war will be about fresh water unless the United States dollar collapses before that. Look at the water prices, the scarcity, and the resources needed to make fresh water from salty water. In combination with the growing population, it is a ticking time bomb. Story 42. The overabundance of doom scrolling and posting doom scrolling content wears on people's psyche negatively to the point where it feels inescapable and utterly trapped by the crippling weight of the world. Meanwhile, outside, animals do not know what day of the week it is, but they are happy to be here for the most part. Let us all seriously let up. Story 43. The Canary Islands have a fault line called La Palma running through them, which could collapse and cause a 1,000-meter high megatsunami. Story 44. Another pandemic, only deadlier. A massive solar flare causing power grid failures around the world. Story 45. If there has not been a major earthquake in the last year or more, or a minor earthquake in the last week, earthquake preparedness in California is largely driven by attention span. Story 46. In 2025, we will see some of the largest solar flares observed since the Carrington event of 1859. This is what experts say would happen. Story 47. Drastic changes in precipitation worldwide. Too much in one place and not enough in another. Food chain collapse due to lack of appropriate pollinators for each region. Farmers unable to quickly adapt to environmental changes, including changing growing seasons. Climate refugees. Massive increase in the number and severity of weather-related disasters. Story 48. World War III. People do not realize how close we are right now. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization literally has 800,000 troops across the border with Russia. All of Europe is currently being staged and prepared to begin massive imports of men and equipment from northern seaports to Russian front lines. The United States logistics is in full swing right now, preparing for war and shaping Europe into a superhighway to support a massive war effort. North Korea is sending troops to Ukraine and cutting diplomatic ties with South Korea. Iran and Israel are in conflict. China has been increasing its harassment and rhetoric towards Taiwan and is inching closer to supplying military aid and support to Russia. China also has a defense pact with North Korea. If war breaks out between North and South Korea and China honors its pact with North Korea, the United States will then also be involved to defend South Korea. Russia and North Korea also have a mutual defense agreement. So basically, it is a Mexican standoff between all the world's biggest and most powerful countries. Once one country flinches, it all goes off. The world is a super dry tinderbox right now, and your drunk uncle is smoking next to it carelessly. The world has spent the last 50+ years building up its military and alliances for this exact situation. Story 49. Honestly, I am nervous about parking ramp collapses, specifically in the United States. Many were built when the average person drove a sedan. Now, trucks are common and electric vehicles weigh several tons. Parking garages were constructed based on the cars people used to drive. I hope I am wrong, but placing several hundred electric vehicles where small vehicles used to be is a recipe for disaster. Story 50. The Cascadia subduction zone in the Pacific Northwest is my top choice. Scientists know that it caused massive earthquakes in the past and has been dormant for over 3 centuries. In other words, it is ready for a major eruption any day now. It is not a matter of if it will happen, but when it will happen. Despite this knowledge for decades, the government has done little to improve preparation or make structures more resistant to earthquakes. When it hits, the destruction will be massive. The New Madrid Fault is another area that has been mostly dormant for a long time and is ready for a major quake, but it is less concerning than the Cascadia subduction zone. Story 51. All the World War I chemical weapons dumped in the sea will soon corrode and leak. Story 52. Orbital nuclear weapons. Most people are afraid of nuclear weapons being launched on land, but it is much more likely that a modern nuclear detonation would occur in our upper atmosphere. Story 53. A big solar storm. There is actually a 4% chance of one happening in 2025, and depending on how big or bad it is, there could be an all-out blackout on the whole planet. That would be very bad, and I would be afraid of that. Story 54. One day the sun will swallow the earth. Unless we become a spacefaring race, every human will die. Story 55. Nuclear escalation in Ukraine and Russia. Or a terrorist organization acquiring a nuclear weapon. All it takes is one. Story 56. A coronal mass ejection could cause an electromagnetic pulse over much of the globe. Search the web for the Carrington event sometime. Story 57. Supernovae in the vicinity. There is some evidence that some extinctions coincided with them, making them a possible cause. Fortunately, there are no stars nearby that would be in our danger zone, but a more distant supernova or a hypernova with jets aimed directly at Earth might have an effect. Story 58. There is a national intravenous solution shortage. I am not seeing much discussion about it. Story 59. Happens every election in the United States of America. People are encouraged to get at each other's throats, supporting a couple of personalities, while they continue to be deceived by the corporations and lobby groups who influence America. No free healthcare at point of contact. Longer working hours than any country in Europe. Less vacation than almost every country in the world. Poor quality food loaded with sugar and chemicals. Communities designed for cars, not people. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.